Commentary comes from Martin Brundle and David Croft.
And welcome along then to what is a very sunny late afternoon here in Melbourne for the opening round of the Formula One World Championship in 2018. We've had 8 days of testing down in Barcelona. The teams and the drivers have had 4 hours on the track here in Melbourne. Let's see if practice makes perfect as we start to get a bit serious in the world's most livable city and the sporting capital of Australia. This is Melbourne and this is the opening round of the Formula One World Championship. For the 23rd time, we are here in Albert Park, where Michael Schumacher has the race lap record, where Lewis Hamilton has the all-time lap record, and where the records could keep tumbling because the cars are significantly faster in 2018. This is the circuit, 3.3 miles long, pretty much, 16 corners, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. You take it at full throttle for 77% of the lap distance, and there are 3, yes, count them, 3 DRS zones to increase that speed. Plenty of overtaking opportunities down into turn 1, where it's a heavy braking zone, 1 of 4 on the track, and you've got to get things right or this sort of thing tends to happen. And then the cars will concertina up once again as they head into turn 3, and yeah, that's been the venue for a couple of very spectacular accidents over the years. Martin Brundle and Fernando Alonso featured there. The drivers won't notice that lake in the middle of the track, but they'll certainly feel the extra grip from the ultra soft tyre. There's not much grip on the track, so Pirelli bring the ultra soft, the super soft and the soft tyres, so the softer end of that Pirelli range for this particular race, where the pole sitter hasn't been the luckiest in the last 8 Australian Grand Prix, only winning 2 of the races. The driver stunning seconds one for the past 2 years, so even if someone's on pole by a long margin, Martin Brundle, it certainly isn't over.
And a very good reminder, they don't hand the prizes out until Sunday. Saturday is all about lining up on the grid, and as you say, it doesn't guarantee you're going to be first into the first corner if you're on pole position. And in fact, for Daniel Ricciardo today, and there he is, even if he is fastest man in the world this afternoon, he'll take a three-place grid drop from his problems yesterday when he didn't slow down quite enough behind the red flags.
He was very, very unlucky. He did slow down, he did respect the red flags, but through a couple of the marshalling sectors, not quite enough, as you say. The stewards decided that leniency was something that they should impose on Daniel Ricciardo. Could have been a 5-place grid penalty. It is a 3-place grid penalty for him. A lot of people still think that wasn't lenient enough. It should have been a reprimand, but there's no appeal. There's no good shouting about it at this particular moment. Can he still feature in the race tomorrow if he can get himself up in, say, the top 5, top 6?
Yes, he can, and 58 lap race, the referee is always right, isn't that the mantra?
Even when we think they're wrong, yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see. They're the new TV screens they have, which are much wider and lower because of the wonderful halo that we have in place this year, and that means we can see none of the driver when he's in the pits and less of him when he's out on the track. But anyway, that's what we've got.
We'll get used to that as well. Back to your referee's always right, even when we think they're wrong analogy. Lance Stroll will be taking part. Didn't have much running this morning while they repaired his gearbox down at Williams. We've got a minute to go to the green light. Let's give you some qualifying pointers from Mark Hughes of Motorsports Magazine. And Mark says Ferrari's slick tyre final runs in P3 were to check if the changes they made since Friday had given it the chassis balance improvement that it's been seeking for this session, and they had an awful lot to try and evaluate. Ferrari fastest, first and second, Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen this afternoon. Much cooler track than yesterday, also wiped clean by the earlier rain, could completely change the setups that were perfected yesterday. It was 42 degrees track temperature, it's 31 degrees at the moment. Mercedes' advantage appears reduced when on the ultra soft tyre. Q3 is when we'll find out the relative power of Mercedes and Ferrari's quali engine modes, those magic modes that they seem to be able to turn on and give them that little extra boost to go in and take those pole positions, where Lewis Hamilton had 11 last year, Valtteri Bottas had 4 and Sebastian Vettel 4 as well, and Kimi Raikkonen 1. Just those guys sharing out the pole positions. So there's the green light then, and welcome to you wherever you are around the world. It is time to get qualifying going for 2018.
We saw them having to push the Renault back there. These cars have awful turning circles. As long as they can get around the hairpin in Monaco, that's all they need. And they're the exact opposite to a London taxi, for example. So pulling out in a narrow pit lane is not always the easiest thing. And the reason they have no turning circle, of course. They have big, fat, slick tyres on the front and highly compromised suspension that's designed to be at its peak at over 200 miles an hour, well over 300 kilometers per hour.
So Nico Hülkenberg then, who's only been in Q3 here once in the past 5 years, out in his Renault, and might just be looking to make it 2 out of 6 this afternoon. He'll want that Renault to be in Q3, but there's competition from the Haas that has looked fast in the dry here. There's competition possibly from Force India too. There's certainly competition Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. We know they're going to be very much up there, and maybe one of the McLarens too.
If you're new to Formula One, welcome. What you're going to see in the next hour is an 18-minute session, followed by a break, 8 minutes, a 15-minute session, followed by a 7-minute break, and then a 12-minute session for the top 10 shooter. Our job in the next 18 minutes is to reduce 5 of these drivers to spectators, then again in Q2, and then it gets busy.
So let's tell you about Charles Leclerc then, one of 4 drivers taking part in a qualifying session here for the first time ever, and one of 2 rookies for this season as well. And a pertinent point made by Charles Leclerc yesterday, Martin, who said it, I underestimated this track a little bit. I really didn't realise how tricky it was before I got out there for real. It's not the easiest start to a season.
And I always say that to young drivers who ask me about it. Sirotkin was asking me about it in the week, the new Williams lad. And I said, it looks simple on the face of it, but so many of the corners are very similar and the corner exits are similar. If you're dialed in, great. If you're not, you can't believe how poor your lap time is. And it's slippery and bumpy as well, which is a good thing.
Well, as we ride on board with Nico Hülkenberg here, how bumpy is it and where are the really bad bumps?
The bumps are more out turn 11 and 12. I mean, they keep resurfacing race. So this one, thankfully, is not ironed like a billiard table, so they need the suspension to work. The drivers have to jockey the car a little bit. And this is like through a parking zone here, isn't it? Turn 5 will be absolutely full throttle. And then under the canopy of the trees, brake in a straight line, down 2 or 3 gears, and you've got to be hard on the gas now. So all the way through turn 8 around the wall, easily full throttle. Clear the traffic, bumpy under braking here. Get it into the apex, and again now full throttle up against the wall on the exit. This back straight is not straight at all, it just curves gently to the left, and now you're looking for a tiny curve, easy for us to see from this angle, there, and they're carrying so much speed through 11 and 12. This is the new drag reduction system zone you were talking about down here, Crofty. A little bit bumpy under braking into 13. Don't get greedy on the way in, because you can pick the throttle up before the apex and get maximum acceleration. A little bit of camber to help you through here. Now, diagonal the track, have it on the right-hand side ready for braking. Small left, flick to the other side of the track and jockey the throttle onto the pit straight. Open the rear wing for another DRS zone. It's a long way down there to the finish line.
Where Nico Hülkenberg crosses it with a 1:25.3. Fastest time in Q1 last year was a 1:24.1 by Lewis Hamilton. We're back on board with Charles Leclerc while we listen to the words of Ted Kravitz down at Force India.
Yep, well, I'm in the pits, Crofty, and everyone's passing me going out on track, including just a few minutes ago, the Force Indias, and they were very keen to get out because they were the least prepared going into this qualifying session in terms of running today. They only did 1 formation lap in free practice 3. There was nothing wrong with the cars. The teams just thought it was crazy that everybody else was going out in wet conditions and risking their cars. Saw no reason to go out and do that, as well as them being limited on engine mileage, of course, Crofty. We've only got 3 engines for the whole of the season, so they chose not to run, even though I understand Esteban Ocon was kind of prompting the team, saying, look, are you sure, guys, I really, really want to go out? But they had to say, no, sorry, Esteban, you're staying in the garage.
And one of the...
Okay, there's the Williams. Should have moved.
Lance Stroll he's talking about there, Martin.
Yeah, one of the key problems Force India have got, I was down there talking to them, is they have a new aero package, but if they break one piece of it, they've got to take the whole thing off and put an old one on, because it's such a package, as it were, of aerodynamic changes. And they've got 1 for each car, so they couldn't risk breaking even one little piece because it annulled the whole thing.
So Kimi Räikkönen's gone fastest with a 1:23.6. second clear of Carlos Sainz. Sergio Perez third fastest. Where's Sebastian Vettel's time, I wonder, going to stack up? He crosses the line with a 1:23.9, so behind his teammate by about 0.3 of a second.
Moaning about traffic, he was very wide in the last corner. Didn't leave anything on the table there, that's for sure.
Hamilton is up marginally through the first sector. Yesterday we saw pace from the Mercedes during the first sector and then losing out to Ferrari and Red Bull on this part of the track, the second sector.
Oh, a little bit wide on the way in there. That puts you completely out of position through the exit then. If you can't get the nose into turn 9, you're in trouble. And the Mercedes just flicks in there. They're flat out through the second part of it and can still stay well within those very bumpy curbs.
See, once again there, the Mercedes losing time in comparison to its nearest rivals. But now, in the final sector, well, so far it's been able to recover some of that lost time. Let's see as he encounters a bit of slow-moving traffic. Brendan Hartley down there and Esteban Ocon down there, and they're trying to keep out of the way. But and where can they go?
They did a good job, really, but Lewis got a little bit too throttle happy there, lit up the rear tyres in 15, and you could see where he left some tyre rubber all the way out of the corner, and the rear of the car was still complaining as he was trying to turn it into 16. Hopefully we'll stay on board with him. Traffic getting out of the way as well as they could. Now what? Listen to this. Yeah, he just spun up the rear tyres, and that left him fighting then through the last part of the corner. And only, I say only P2, because we think the Mercedes is the car to beat.
Whatever this man does, they'll be cheering him throughout his entire qualifying escapades. Daniel Ricciardo, to remind you, with a 3-place grid penalty as he starts his first attack lap, his first fast lap. Raikkonen from Bottas now ahead of Hamilton. I told you they'd be cheering him all the way through. Not had the greatest of luck at his home Grand Prix, and that luck, the bad luck, seems to be continuing so far this weekend. The man that once stood on the podium here, and then they took that second place off him for a fuel flow irregularity. How's he done through the first sector in his Red Bull in 2018? Ricciardo only 4/100ths of a second behind that best sector time, so very much on the pace.
Ooh, sweet through 7, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And watch the bumpy zone into 9. Bang, 5G, 5 times the force of gravity, slowed down, hits the apex nicely. Flat out through the exit, incredible torque, incredible twisting power of these engines as they gather straight line speed. There's 11 and 12, it looks pretty simple from there, and terrifying when you're behind the wheel.
Absolutely spectacular with a backdrop of Melbourne a long way behind Daniel Ricciardo. Verstappen not going quite as quick as his teammates at the moment. It's Raikkonen, Bottas, Hamilton, Vettel and Fernando Alonso, the top 5. Carlos Sainz 6 at the moment and back in the garage. Ricciardo's lost just that little bit more time through the second sector. Now he rounds the final corner at around about 120 miles an hour. DRS wide open. You can see the gap in the rear wing. Crosses the line, goes second fastest.
That's a cracking time from Raikkonen, fastest of course, and Verstappen slightly slower than his teammate Ricciardo. That's quite a benchmark Kimi Raikkonen set there.
It certainly is. Kimi was on pole here in 2007, and not since then has he troubled the pole position records around Albert Park in Australia. Red Bull have had a pretty miserable time of qualifying here. No top 4 start since 2014. Not so this man, Lewis Hamilton, comes into this opening race of the season knowing that he's had pole here for the last 4 years, and he can break the record currently held by himself and Ayrton Senna of 6 pole positions if he can get top spot here today.
He's definitely not got the front end on it through 9. He's obviously quick somewhere else, but 9 it understeers, the front slides.
So he's a 10th down again after his middle sector, and now into the next DRS zone, the drag reduction system. Hamilton adjusting the steering wheel all along, 8th gear down to 4th gear as he takes turn 13 at round about 100 miles an hour.
Now look at the speed I think carries in there. So stable as well under braking. Nose went into that one a bit better. That's a better exit. He didn't have traffic to distract him. Quite wide here, recovers it.
And along the Walker Straight, renamed in memory of the late Ron Walker, the man who brought the race to Melbourne, Lewis Hamilton goes faster, but not fast enough to beat Kimi Raikkonen.
How exciting.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough to beat the Ferrari.
The sandbagging, surely. Or Ferrari have got a great time.
That is not sandbagging, Crofty.
No.
That's oversteering. That's being a hooligan, actually.
He's been accused of that round these parts before.
Yes.
Niki Lauda, the non-executive chairman at Mercedes, but still there to offer some wise words of counsel to whoever cares to need them. Fernando Alonso advising his McLaren team at the end of practice this morning that they maybe should have got him out on the track a little bit earlier so he could have had some dry running. It didn't quite happen for him and he was rather irked about it. We have just under 7 3/4 minutes to go in this session. As you can see on your graphics on the left-hand side, Sirotkin is in danger. Leclerc, Ericsson, Hartley, Stroll and Gasly need to improve. They are in the relegation zone at current.
I'm afraid the Sauber Alfa Romeo is missing so much downforce at the moment. It's virtually guaranteed to be last in these conditions.
Alonso crosses the line. He improves his time, stays in 7th place though, at 1.1 seconds off the pace. So from here on in, Martin.
So it's a 10th.5 to Raikkonen, and that's mainly a middle sector, half a 10th final sector.
Lewis Hamilton being told just where he needs to pick up the pace a little bit, where he's losing out. Who would you say is completely safe? Anyone from Hulkenberg up to Raikkonen might not need to go again, or do they, do you think?
Two Saubers, probably two Toro Rosso Hondas, and then it's which of the Williams squeezes through. You'd sort of guess before it started. Surprise performances here so far. The Renault engined, McLaren and the Renault itself. Alonso and Sainz up in 7th and 8th.
Sebastian Vettel, whilst we watch Charles Leclerc, has just set the best middle sector so far. He could be challenging his teammates' best time of this session. Charles Leclerc is currently plumb last of the 20 times. He's the latest to cross the line and does so, and goes ahead of his teammate Marcus Ericsson and Brendan Hartley as well. 18th fastest. Ericsson can do something about it. He's on for a personal best lap and he might have a couple of tenths in hand on his teammate through the first couple of sectors. Sirotkin is in 15th place. Ericsson jumps into 12th. Decent lap there, and that's going to start then to worry the likes of Perez and Magnussen and Ocon, who know that they can't really afford to make any mistakes because Ericsson's just gone ahead of them.
And what that also tells all of those ahead of that excellent job from Ericsson there in the Sauber, that the track is coming to...
Check what happened in 10-11. He was like in between two gears, the car. Okay, understood, we're checking now.
False neutral. That tells me the track's just getting... I mean, it had a good old wash, didn't it, this morning? It's called a green track when it's dirty and dusty and it just washes the rubber content off. But that tells me, and that's going to wake everybody up, Crofty, to get out there.
Track cooling all the time as well. Tyres holding up and available to go for lap after lap. Lewis Hamilton goes quickest by, as you can see, nearly 3/10 of a second from Kimi Raikkonen, whose teammate Sebastian Vettel is currently 3rd fastest. That's Pete Bonington, Lewis Hamilton's race engineer, and we've got 5 minutes to go. And the bottom 5, Brendan Hartley and Charles Leclerc, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly, and Sergei Sirotkin, 2 Williams down in that bottom 5 at present. The youngest driver lineup for many, many years, and the youngest driver lineup on the grid, struggling just a touch at the moment. Here's Romain Grosjean, currently 11th fastest, nearly half a second down on Lewis Hamilton through the first sector alone. The Haas was looking an awful lot better than this yesterday in the warmer temperatures of practice 1 and practice 2. Esteban Ocon in the danger zone a bit, but he's just coming around now the final corners of his outlap to begin to go again.
So it's Ferrari who have been sandbagging, if anybody, Crofty. 2nd and 3rd at the moment, suddenly bring themselves right into play in pure lap time. And ahead of both the Red Bulls. It was becoming sort of paddock knowledge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Red Bull were faster than Ferrari. Right now, that's not the case. We haven't seen them on full beans yet, mind you.
Last year, Lewis Hamilton was quickest in second practice, half a second clear of Sebastian Vettel, who went on to win the race. This year, he was half a second quicker than Sebastian Vettel, who still might fancy his chances this weekend, as Grosjean jumps up into 6th fastest overall. That comment you made about the track is starting to come to them, Martin, borne out by Grosjean leaping all the way into the top 6.
Yeah, really, you could just tell the things coming on. Look at how low the pressures are in the rear tyres as it's oscillating on the curbs. When they've got some power in, it's not such a big deal. And that's interesting. Look, DRS going up and down there on the Mercedes. Very unusual to see that happen. Normally, goes up, but you get a beep in your ear when it's available to you, which is all the time in qualifying, in the DRS zones, it must be said. And of course, Lewis does that manually, doesn't he?
Right, let's go down to the pit wall and hear live from Christian Horner, the Red Bull team boss. You've got Daniel Ricciardo 5th fastest, Max Verstappen 4th fastest. Once again, little to choose between your two guys on the track in qualifying, Christian. Who may or may not be able to talk to us at the moment. He's been very chatty all weekend long. Are you there, Christian? As Esteban Ocon goes 10th fastest, Sergio Perez, his teammate, now in that danger zone as well. Perez out on the track, and just looking at the timing screens, on a personal best at the moment, enough to jump him out of that bottom 5. Just wonder here, guys in danger. Fernando Alonso might have to do something with one more lap. Ericsson's going to go again, Hulkenberg, Van Dorn, Sainz as well.
Yep, we obviously heard Fernando talking about in between two gears, that false neutral that cost him a decent run and lock up, as you saw for yourselves. With the Force India, as soon as the inside front tyre comes unloaded.
Well, there's Perez going 10th fastest, 1.5 seconds down. Hopefully we can speak to Christian Horner. Are you with us, Christian?
I am. Good afternoon, Crofty.
Good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us. There's not a lot between Max and Daniel. Does this bode well for a very close qualifying all season long between those two?
I think, as we've seen in previous seasons, there's not much to choose between the two of them. So yeah, and hopefully pushing each other, they'll get each other up the grid.
Bit surprised at the Ferrari pace, Christian?
I think they've nailed a good lap there. I think both our guys didn't have, perfect laps. The track's ramping up after that rain we had this morning. So I think it'll move around a bit, Martin, over the next couple of sessions.
You got any toys left in the box for some extra power?
Not big ones. So yeah, we're still looking for them.
Little jack in the box, that's what you need, Christian. We'll be back with you in qualifying too, if we can. We're down to the final minutes of Q1. Sirotkin, Gasly, Stroll, Leclerc and Hartley all need to do better. Nico Hulkenberg is on the cusp of relegation as well, and he's through the second sector, around about 6/10 off. You see the driver in danger, Marcus Ericsson. We saw him leap up towards the top 12 a few moments ago. Now he's back under threat once again. Lance Stroll 3/10 up on a time he needs to get out of that bottom 5. Sergei Sirotkin not going quite as well on his first F1 qualifying.
Neat and tidy lap from Hulkenberg, had to short shift just to dull the power a bit, so he had better traction, and it should help him a lot into the 23s. That's the kind of pace we're expecting from the works Renault. And again, midfield, as we've been predicting through the winter, is going to be mighty, mighty competitive.
Here's Lance Stroll next to cross the line. He'll see the checkered flag, and it's a 1:24 for Lance Stroll, 4.6, and he goes 12th fastest overall. Sirotkin stays in the bottom 5. Next to cross the line was Carlos Sainz. He's 6th fastest. What about Stoffel Van Dorn, who's down there in 15th at the moment and would dearly like to move a few places higher than that. Van Dorn goes 11th fastest. Brendan Hartley will be next to cross the line, and here's plumb last at the moment, the Kiwi who got married during the course of the winter, whose wife Sarah is here to cheer him on here today, and I'm sure a few have made the 3-hour flight over the Tasman Sea from New Zealand as well. Hartley crosses the line. It's coming up to him now. Can he get off the bottom? He can, but not out of qualifying 1 and into Q2. He is still in that bottom 5. Charles Leclerc, meanwhile, wants to lift himself off the bottom. Where's Charles Leclerc? He goes to 17th fastest. Not quite enough, but ahead for a brief moment of his teammate Marcus Ericsson, who just misses out as well. Pierre Gasly is now the slowest.
That's a good lap. Yeah! That's very good, Lance. Very, very good.
Lance Stroll has got his Williams into Q2 at the expense of Brendan Hartley, Marcus Ericsson, Charles Leclerc, his teammate Sergei Sirotkin, and Pierre Gasly as well. Esteban Ocon was right on the cusp by 3/100ths of a second. He's just survived that first qualifying session, possibly not where Force India thought their two cars would be.
No, unless they can find some pace at Force India, it's starting to look like a bit of a long season. They've had that no man's land, as it's being called, between the top 3 teams and the rest of the pack, pretty much to themselves now, haven't they, for a couple of seasons? But of course, McLaren, Renault, Haas, they've all improved.
What I would say, Force India have never been a team that have prioritised qualifying. They're quite happy often to accept an 11th or 12th on the grid to then go and score points in the race. And we'll see where they stack up in Q2. And they've brought a big upgrade package here that they're looking to develop, and then maybe from China onwards start to understand just that little bit better. As for Williams, well, one in, one out. Was possibly a damage limitation for them in this particular session. The two Saubers, Martin, they might both have got knocked out, but they weren't last.
They did a good job. You could just watch the car slide when you're out on track, watching it on the TV. So I would say that was one of the standout performances, actually. Ericsson and Sainz further up the table in 6th in Q1 today.
Yeah, as we just watch a replay here of Pierre Gasly, this could explain why he was last.
No grip out there, son.
You're not gonna pick up much time going out there, sadly, for Pierre Gasly as he starts his first full season in Formula One.
Go locked off.
And the Saubers, Marcus Ericsson's his 77th race. Charles Leclerc, it's his debut this weekend, separated by what, a 1/10 of a second. That's not a bad job at all by Charles Leclerc in the second Sauber. Out in front, Hamilton, Raikkonen, Vettel, the top 3. If you look at the speed traps, well, the Renault runners a little bit down on the straights, but Carlos Sainz for the Works Renault team up in 6th. That's not a bad job from him either. So grey skies overhead, officially 30% risk of rain for this session. I hope you've still got your coat on, Simon Lazenby.
I do indeed. As always, here for the first qualifying session, everyone there utterly glued to the screens. Nico Rosberg, if he's just waking up back in the UK, is with us for a few races this year. Early impressions then, I mean, it looked like Ferraris got some surprising pace. I think a lot of people were thinking that Red Bull might have been the second quickest. Too early to tell.
Ferrari surprised all of us out there at the moment. They're looking good, and Raikkonen a little bit better than Sebastian. It's been that tendency this weekend, which is also a bit surprising. Lewis pulled one out in the end. He extended his run, but we know that Mercedes don't ramp up their engine in qualifying 1, so they still have some reserves to come. Let's see, but I think Mercedes is looking best for now.
Yeah, just an interesting moment, wasn't there, with Bottas's DRS? What was going on there? I mean, he's down the timesheets, but nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it looked like he opened DRS, and if you lift, if you have a bit of a slide, then obviously it cancels it and he just opens it again. Could have been that, but it looked like it was open well enough. You can see here, it goes on. It could also be that he's triggered it again, just not realising he's got on it that early, and then it opens again. And I don't think you've lost any time with that. It was momentarily.
That looks like the shakes on the thumb from the high stress. It really can happen. It's not a joke. Because everything is shaking so much, it can happen.
Great stuff. With regards to this track, I mean, obviously we're seeing it coming too. So is it beneficial to be last man out there, really? Is it you get that much evolution here?
Yeah, because this morning the track was completely drenched. So at the moment out there, it's just ramping up so quickly and very difficult. And each time you go out, the limit is much further away. And this is one of the places where Lewis is at his best. Yeah, finding that new limit instinctively every time. He does that very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, we talked it up, didn't we, coming into to qualifying here, the battle of the midfield, but we're just watching it. I mean, Sainz, Alonso, Grosjean, all changing position regularly. I mean, it looks like nothing to choose between those 3 teams.
Yeah, and that's kind of Q3. Haas looking very strong. The interesting one, I think, is Renault versus McLaren. You know, they know they've got the same engine, so it's kind of the battle of the cars and where it is. But you know, I kind of agree with Nico. Raikkonen straight out the box all weekend has just looked more at ease than what Vettel's been on this track.
Yeah, absolutely. Kimi fans, great start. Back upstairs, David, all yours.
Thanks ever so much indeed, Simon. We've just taken a little breather here in the commentary box. How good did that feel? Seeing the cars back out on track in anger for the first time, Martin. I've missed that in the last few months.
Absolutely, it's so close, isn't it? Third at 1:23.3, and we go down to 11th on a 1:23.9. That will tighten up as the track grips up as well. And somewhere in there is a Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, you see, you've got to drink from the boot these days if you're coming down here and you're supporting Daniel Ricciardo. Merchandising opportunities are all around him. So the sun's trying to peek through a few clouds. There is the risk of a shower or two. Might just spice things up for the end of this qualifying session. Daniel Ricciardo's only missed Q3 once in the last 48 races. Neither Force India reached Q3 here in 2017, and Kevin Magnussen's not been in Q3 since Brazil 2014, so lots to improve on there. And the clock ticks then to 5:25 in the evening, late afternoon here in Melbourne. The light is green, the cars aren't exactly rushing out on the track. So Ted Kravitz, let's head down to you.
And I've got to say, the biggest disappointment for me there in that session, Crofty, was Toro Rosso Honda. I mean, we know, you know, from McLaren last year, the Honda engine isn't exactly the most powerful power unit out there. They've done pretty good things with reliability over the winter. At least it's not failing, and that's allowed them to do plenty of laps, hasn't it, Crofty? But where did the performance go? Well, in the case of Pierre Gasly, it went with a mistake, didn't it? We saw just at the end he made a mistake and locked up and went across the gravel. Brendan Hartley did find almost a second just between his previous run, his final run in Q1, but it's just disappointed. I think they'll be really disappointed not to make it out of Q1 with either.
And as they've learned over the last 20 years, Ted, disappointing you is not a smart thing to do.
I just had such high hopes. I mean, Hartley is actually targeting, he's been saying all weekend that he just wants, and he thinks it's possible, P10. He thinks he can score a debut point here in the race tomorrow. I suppose it's possible.
He's set to start, Ted, his first ever Grand Prix without a grid penalty, so there's still a chance there.
Yes, good stat, good stat.
Don't you realise it's the hope that kills you in the end by now?
The trouble is he's sort of back where he was with a penalty. That's the trouble at the moment. But that's, I agree with Ted. I thought they would be stronger than that. I thought, and it still had that sort of funny Honda misfire when we were on board that camera, wasn't it, above the halo there.
So why is everyone waiting around a little bit, Martin? Do they feel that the track might be a little bit better towards the end of this session as it cools down again, as more rubber goes down? Are we going to see a bit of a carbon copy, I wonder, of Q1?
Well, they know they've only got 2 runs, so they might as well do them if they think it's not going to rain. They're not just teasing us, I don't think. They just know that the time required to get 2 runs in a 15-minute session.
Interestingly, Verstappen on super soft tyres, not the ultra softs that the likes, say, of Kimi Räikkönen are running. Ted, very quickly down to you.
Yeah, I found that interesting as well, Crofty. I'm wondering if that's
split strategy from Red Bull.
No, why would they do that?
Do they want to start this race on super soft tyres? Remember, and we should remind people back at home joining us for the first time this season at this opening race, that the tyres you set your fastest time on in Q2, if you go through into the top 10, they're the tyres you start your race on. So it might be that some want the super soft tyres to run a bit longer in that first stint if they think they've got the pace to do it.
Well, because especially now I've seen Daniel Ricciardo go out on the red super soft as well rather than the purple ultra soft. Yes, it does start to make sense because we saw, didn't we, that Mercedes were overheating their ultra soft tyres when they went on them earlier on in the weekend. So maybe Red Bull think if they can just outlast Mercedes, who they might assume are going to lock out the front row or get very close to that, then they can get the jump on them in the first stint, go longer, and then maybe even extend that and retain track position after the first round of pit stops.
And also we saw yesterday when they put the ultra softs on, they were super fast on the first lap. Handy for an undercut in the Grand Prix, isn't it?
Yep.
If you swap that strategy around. But we'll see. What do we think the delta is, the difference between ultras and supers? It's not massive, is it?
3/4 tenths.
Yeah, half-second max, isn't it?
So remember last year, and if you weren't with us last year, you know you missed a frustrating time for Lewis Hamilton, who came in for his pit stop, then got stuck behind Max Verstappen, couldn't clear him, and Sebastian Vettel then romped off to win by 10 seconds. So with Red Bull staying out a bit longer and having the extra pace and a free track, well, that might not help Mercedes.
So the challenge, of course, is doing a fast enough time to get into the top 10 shootout whilst on the one step harder compound.
Yeah. And I tell you what, if you are running, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves and talking about the race here, if you're running super soft and soft, that should be a slam dunk one-stop race for you. You won't need to stop twice.
And also, if you think Mercedes and Ferrari got a better qualifying boost, happy hour as Mercedes are teasing us all with, and you think you're going to be row 3 anyway, why not try something different?
why are we talking about this amongst ourselves? We should go down to the pit wall and ask Christian Horner what's going on down there. We'll do that in a couple of moments, and he can hopefully give us an answer or two whilst we watch Kimi Räikkönen out on track, and boy was he a bit rapid in Q1.
Wow, he was close to the wall on the way into 11 there. Great precision there from Kimi. Yeah, just enough throttle to make the rear tyres complain a little bit on lateral grip. Flick it right, brake in a straight line. There we go, he managed to lean on the curb. This looks great, this is really great. Kimi's really on it this afternoon.
15 years and a day since his first win in Formula One in Malaysia in 2003. Kimi Räikkönen puts in a 1:22.5, 3/10 clear of Max Verstappen, but that shows you that 3/4 delta possibly then between the super soft and the ultra soft tyre, and that puts Verstappen's lap into perspective as well.
Yeah, I think on those tyres, Verstappen will not be too unhappy with that.
Let's see where Sebastian Vettel then stacks up on the ultra soft tyre, the quickest tyre in the range, the softest compound. It's that they brought this weekend. Vettel goes second fastest at 1:22.6 behind his teammate Kimi Räikkönen once again.
Ooh, that's a nasty lock up there for Hulkenberg. Very nasty. We saw the plume of blue smoke as we were on board with Räikkönen. And then it would be amazed if he hasn't broken some bits underneath that car. Hamilton then, a 22 flat. Take that, everybody.
Those magic modes, the extra quali boost, is that what we've just seen there as Lewis Hamilton goes half a second quicker than Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel and Valtteri Bottas follow. 6/10 between Hamilton and his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who comes into this race having got pole in the last two Grand Prix of 2017, but he's nowhere near his teammate on that particular lap. All he has to do is get into the top 10, of course. We're not talking about pole just yet, but that could be quite demoralising.
Yeah, I reckon it's park it and light a cigar, that one.
As long as he goes out the back of the garage first, he wouldn't be doing that sat in the cockpit. So we've got Carlos Sainz on the track at the moment, a 27.5 and a 22.6 for the first two sectors. It leaves him a little bit down, but where will this put him? Into the top 10, you would think. Long drag down to the line.
Okay, I need to know who is pushing, who is not. I cannot stop in the middle of the corner.
Asking his race engineer there just to keep me a bit informed so I can either keep out of the way or keep ahead if I need to. Did Sainz make a lock-up? Yes, he did.
Both Renaults locking the front, so struggling with a bit of front tyre temperature, I'd imagine. And obviously you can adjust the brake bias, the amount of pressure that goes to the front axle or the rear axle, and a number of other tools they've got.
Lance Stroll, who finished 19th in Q1 on his racing debut here in Australia last year, same place as his teammate Sergei Sirotkin did this particular afternoon, on track and into Q2 this time around for Lance Stroll. Worth mentioning, Kevin Magnussen's put in a decent lap compared to his teammate, 3/10 between the two Haas drivers. Magnussen currently in the top 9 as Stroll makes his way now towards turn 11 and 12, that very fast chicane where on entry you're around about 170 miles an hour, 165 miles an hour on exit. Stroll's about 1.3 seconds, as you can see, down on the fastest time so far.
Problem is for Sainz and particularly Hulkenberg, who's not in anyway, but if that's the tyres they get through to the top 10 shootout with, they've got a nasty flat spot on them, so they want to go again. They can replace them if they're dangerous.
And they're allowed to kind of mix and match from other sets of the same compound to get around that. That's a new rule for 2018. Right, where's Lance Stroll going to be when he crosses the line? He goes 11th fastest, so outside of the top 10, but only by a couple of tenths to Stoffel Van Dorn. Both McLarens are in that top 10 at the moment, but Hulkenberg and Ocon haven't set a time yet, and Perez with a 1:24.2, a little bit slower than you would have thought. 0.6 of a second to his teammate, first down to fourth, Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton. It's a very wide margin, that.
Valtteri's not really been on Lewis's pace, has he, so far this weekend? Just a little something somewhere missing. Drivers, I mean, Hamilton's found 0.8 of a second. That's partly turbo power, of course. Kimi found a half second. Vettel 0.8. Bottas a second. Verstappen obviously on the different tyres. 6/10, 6/10, and then the rest of them have found nearly nothing.
Christian Horner, welcome back. 2 seconds, we'll hear from Fernando Alonso first, if that's okay.
It's quite dark out here, so I think we go for the next run quite quick.
Are your drivers itching to get out there? Do you think that rain might be coming in, Christian?
Well, he reports of rain at the moment. It's got a little bit darker overhead, but doesn't look anything particularly threatening unless you can tell me something different.
No, I just listening to Fernando Alonso there saying he thought it was getting a bit dark as well. Super soft tyres in that first run. Might that be a tyre that you stick with for your next runs in Q2 and a good starting tyre for you?
You're asking all the pertinent questions today, Crofty.
I've had a long winter.
Exactly, so wait and see.
But that obviously a deliberate plan there. Is that something you feel that you might have to do, though, to go back to our previous conversation, because you haven't got those magic engine modes to give you the power you might need?
It was a deliberate plan for that run, which is why we run them. If you look in the speed trap, look at the 6 cars at the bottom end of the speed trap, you can see what we're trying to mitigate against. So, yeah, it's not something unusual. We're just trying to play to where our strengths are.
And your car looked like it was very good out of the box on Ultras, so it might be a good undercut opportunity tomorrow, Christian.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a multi-stop race tomorrow. It looks like it's leaning more towards 1 stop than 2 stops, but you know, that can change as a circuit. You know, it's still quite green at the moment, hasn't got a lot of rubber on it. So as the rubber goes down, that can quite often change on a Sunday afternoon.
Christian, thanks ever so much. We'll be with you in Q3. Assuming, of course, both Red Bulls are in Q3. Looking quite good for it at the moment.
Wouldn't switch his microphone off just yet.
Romain Grosjean then. A little bit down on his teammate Kevin Magnussen in that first run. Once again, yeah, Haas have got a car there in the top 10 as it stands at the moment. A car that looks a little bit easier for the drivers to handle than the 2017 model.
And they say they fixed their braking issues finally. They've sort of had a couple of years, haven't they?
Yeah.
Front brakes locked and a tyre just doesn't give you the retardation when it's not going round, basically. You're pushing the rubber down the track at a couple of 100 kilometres an hour, 150 miles an hour or something, wearing a big hole in it, and it will not slow you down unless it's rotating.
Kevin Magnussen, formerly McLaren driver, was last in Q3, driving for McLaren to Brazil in 2014. And talking of McLaren, who do have 2 drivers in the top 10 at the moment. Last time they got both cars into Q3 in Australia, 2012, when they locked out the front row.
No ABS on these cars, of course, like you'd have on your road car. So it's the driver who's got to modulate the brakes. They have got some pretty spectacular systems on them to help them do that, but that's why we see cars locking up. No traction control either, no stability control, no iPod player, and they're bereft of things. No sat-nav, although plenty of GPS, it must be said.
Yeah, well, how do they know where they're going? No sat-nav. They've got no cup holders for their drinks as well. That's the one that I find a bit odd.
Maybe that's why they put the halo on.
Esteban Ocon has some work to do. Didn't set a time in that first run in Q2. Ted, we can go down to you.
Yeah, just to confirm, both Red Bulls have stayed on that red stripe super soft tyre, the tyre that you can get a longer stint length out of, just to give them those strategic options in the race tomorrow.
Nice to see someone doing something a little bit different on strategy there, Martin.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting in the race, isn't it? But I'm probably most pleased with Ferrari's pace here. It's we were concerned that Mercedes were going to run and hide, especially in qualifying. Mind you, half-second gap is not too bad for Hamilton, but it's not Q3 yet.
Yep. Mercedes, if it was Q3, well, they wouldn't be looking at a 51st front row lockout in Formula One. They have 50 to their name. The record 62, by the way, which could go at some stage this season. You never know. So let's keep watching Esteban Ocon and Romain Grosjean. The clock's on him as well. Grosjean's setting better times than his previous lap. Kevin Magnussen, his teammate, was a 10th of a second ahead of him during his first sector of this lap, and he's gone another 10th quicker in the second sector as well. Ocon is on an out lap.
All 15 cars on track. You get that traffic jam as they're trying to make space at the end of the lap.
Grosjean goes 7th fastest then. and 50 seconds to go in this Q2 session. So he's put himself into the top 10. Stoffel Vandoorne is now out, and Kevin Magnussen's in a little bit of danger. But as I mentioned, first two sectors, he was going quicker than his teammate. Hulkenberg, Ocon, Perez, Stroll, and Vandoorne, the five that do need to go faster as Sebastian Vettel starts his final lap in Q2, and Magnussen goes 7th fastest ahead of his teammate again, this time by about a 1/10 and a half. Nico Hulkenberg next across the line goes 9th fastest, pushes his teammate Carlos Sainz out of the top 10. Sainz had a really good first sector though. If he can keep that going, he should be on to get back into the top 10 once again as we look at Stoffel Vandoorne, who didn't have the best of time in qualifying against his teammate Fernando Alonso last season. What can he show us as the checkered flag will start to flutter on the gantry? He crosses the line now. Vandoorne misses out on Q3. Alonso stays in 10th for the time being, and Lewis Hamilton was out on the track, has gone back into the garage, didn't want to go any faster than that 1:22.0.
Which Bottas matched.
And Valtteri Bottas, yeah, by 3/100ths of a second is slower now. Carlos Sainz goes 7th fastest. That's pushed Fernando Alonso out of the top 10. So McLaren are not going to get their two cars into the top 10 here, or either one of their top cars into the top 10. Verstappen goes 3rd fastest. A great middle sector by Sebastian Vettel, best of the lot. Could he be challenging Lewis Hamilton, I wonder? Esteban Ocon had no time. Esteban Ocon stays 15th fastest. Perez for Force India only 13th fastest. Not been the best qualifying session for them. Here's Sebastian Vettel now as he comes up towards the line. Can he go quicker than Hamilton? Yes, he can, by a 1/10 of a second, and that is now game on officially between Mercedes and Ferrari.
Track getting ever better, but that's a good lap time. It's Vettel v Hamilton again. Not too bad, we enjoyed that last year, but Bottas right in there as well. Verstappen too, considering the tyres that he's on. So top 10 shootout, don't go anywhere, that's going to be good.
Daniel Ricciardo decided not to complete the lap he was on.
And we are P11, mate, P11. Yeah, so it's good, it's okay.
Alonso said this could be a world of pain in Australia, and they'll get better in Bahrain, which will be music to the ears of the man on your left hand side with Zach Brown, one of the Bahraini shareholders in the McLaren team. Just to complete what I was saying, Daniel Ricciardo decided to pit before the end of his lap that he was on at the end of Q2. He didn't like the set of tyres that he was on because he locked up and he got a flat spot on one of them. So best not to start the race on these, he said. 2 Force Indias, Martin, in that 5 that got eliminated. Surprised? They weren't in Q3 last year here.
No. We know they, as you said earlier on, they tend to go for the longer game. But where are they? 15th and 13th. How far are they off the pace getting in?
What happened with Grosjean? Did he hold you up?
Well, he was ahead, same as Hamilton in practice.
So he feels then he did get hampered by Romain Grosjean.
Yeah, just looking at the relative pace. Perez fastest 24.0, so to get it break into the top 10, they needed a half a second, basically. Not too bad.
So it's Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll, Sergio Perez and Stoffel Vandoorne, and that man there, Fernando Alonso, who don't make it through into Q3. And in Q3, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton, well, not separated much on their laps in Q2. Will we see that resume? Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen, Kimi Räikkönen and Daniel Ricciardo, what role will they play in the top 10 shootout? You've got 2 Renaults in there of Nico Hulkenberg and Carlos Sainz, and you've got 2 Hasses, Romain Grosjean, and for the first time since Brazil in 2014, Kevin Magnussen is in Q3 as well. Can't wait for that to come. And the fans can take a breath or two, and that man there, Esteban Ocon, will probably want to go and talk to a few people and see whether Romain Grosjean hampered him to the extent that he wasn't going to get through. Lots to be done in and around the garages. Let's head to the paddock and Simon.
Oh, game on at the front. Great headline time that for Sebastian Vettel, and everyone watching at home will be thrilled to see. It looks like we've got a fight at the front. Okay, let's hear from a few of the drivers, including a couple of the rookies, starting with Charles Leclerc, talking to James Galloway.
Charles, your first ever Formula One qualifying session, and just behind your teammate, you must be quite happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a positive session overall because we did not expect to be so close from Q2. On the other hand, I'm a little bit disappointed with myself because I did an error in turn 4, which costed us a little bit of time, and we knew we were very close from Q2, so it could have been a lot better for us. But on the other hand, I'm very happy overall.
And you've told us over the winter that the car is, quite difficult to understand. Is that understanding increasing here in Melbourne, and will that help you tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have done big steps forward. The car is easier to drive and easier to push to the limit, and I think this is very positive. We need to keep going that way, but yeah, we understood quite a lot here.
Thank you very much. Your first time in Melbourne, your first time in Formula One qualifying. Is it all about a learning day today?
Yeah, we can say so. We can say so. It was obviously not the easiest way to come here and do the things. With FP3, obviously, changes a bit your, mindset and all the philosophy of working towards the quali, which was dry again. Yeah, we're not too bad in the beginning, to be honest. But I think we didn't find, the last bit as other people did in, progressing throughout the Q1 with the track evolution and so on. So, yeah, still need to, to go deep into details to analyze what went wrong or what we could do better. So, yeah.
And looking forward to your first Formula One race and taking that analysis from tonight into tomorrow and making some good progress.
That's the target, obviously. Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit early to say. Obviously, I just got out from the car, so yeah, I go to see what we could do better, what we could improve, and we work from there.
Brendan, so close to Q2 there, but a slight disappointment maybe you didn't make into that second phase?
Definitely a little bit annoyed to be 16th and not 1 or 2 places ahead. It was really tight. The car felt good on that last lap. Bit frustrating because I can't help but feel like there was a couple of tenths left on the table from my side. I guess everyone will have a similar story, but that battle from 10th to the back is really tight. Today we just missed out. A little bit annoying, but it's still there's a lot of positives from today, from the first round with Honda Tour. Also, we've got big targets to progress during the year, and I think it shows we can definitely fight in that midfield, and if not tomorrow, soon battle to be in the points. But let's see. This morning was really encouraging, and so was a long run pace yesterday. Just a question of how we make up a few places on Sunday.
Damien, a quick word on the rookies. Charles Leclerc, obviously, part of the Ferrari Young Driver program and widely expected if he continues his trajectory that he may well end up in one of those cars in the senior team one day. But just explain how hard it is and what they'll have gone through coming into today.
It's massively hard. I think this is the first time. You can see it in their faces. They're all a bit shell-shocked. You can go testing, you can go in the simulator, but there's nothing like the heat of battle. And the first time you go out there and you suddenly realise, oh boy, everyone else has turned the wick up, and it's a bit of a shock to the system, isn't it, Johnny?
It is, and again, when you're up against your teammate, you can see it with obviously Ericsson, his teammate, and it's something that he's behind. He'd be very disappointed with that, but it's hopefully a lesson learnt that he can sort of jump on board next time around in qualifying in Bahrain and beat his teammate. That's an important thing to do.
Track evolving all the time, but the headline from Q2 there, the performance of Sebastian Vettel. He got ahead of Hamilton. Let's see if they can maintain that in the first race for pole of the season. Back upstairs.
Lewis Hamilton could break the record for pole positions here at Albert Park. He and the late great Ayrton Senna have 6 each. It could be 7 for Hamilton today, but Sebastian Vettel has laid down the challenge. His lap of a 1:21.9 at the end of Q2 is the outright Albert Park track record and the first sub 1 minute 22 lap in the history of this race. Is it Vettel against Hamilton? Can Bottas and Raikkonen get in on the act, and where can the 2 Red Bulls put themselves as well? Ricciardo's got a 3-place grid penalty. Verstappen is right up there. This could be a very tasty top 10 shootout. Tej Kravitz, down to you.
Just watching the Ferraris come out, and Toto Wolff was right, wasn't he? So he must have some interesting options in terms of clever computer programs that tell him and Mercedes when Ferrari had their engine turned down. Do you remember, Crofty, in the pre-show, he said, we know that Ferrari had their engine turned down so far. Well, must have done some sound analysis, because now that they've turned it up, they have delivered, and it really is an engine track, isn't it? As Max Verstappen was saying on Thursday, long straights and then just more or less 90-degree corners. So it just looks like it's played into Ferrari's hands.
Yeah, the sound analysis and all the GPS data they get, they know each other's cars, even though it's race one from testing, and they know each other's cars incredibly well already. And then there are a number of photographers wandering around this place, and their sole job is to get images of the competition. So especially when they break down and they're on they'd love to see them on a nice truck so they can photograph the underneath of them as well.
It's the worst thing imaginable for any leading team to break down and have everyone take these photos of the underside of your car. Right, on board with Lewis Hamilton then, Martin. The sun is setting here at Albert Park. It's peeking through the clouds. Take us through this lap.
The shadows are quite difficult, actually, especially later on in the lap. Long curve down to turn 3. It's why it's a slightly deceptive corner. Bumpy on the outside. The car turned in really well there, didn't it? Oh, we got that's
Valtteri Bottas has gone into the wall. He did it in the race here a few years ago for Williams. He's brought out the red flag as well. That is a big dent in the back of that Mercedes for Valtteri Bottas, and this is what happened.
So he's gone wide in 1 and straight to the scene of the accident on the outside of 2. Stayed on the throttle, engine still revving there, so he's got a little bit wide and just wouldn't give up on it. Just a little touch on the grass, and with the front and rear in like that, that's a huge amount of damage, and wrecks his teammate's lap, of course.
Toto Wolff injured his hand skiing over the winter, but not to the extent he couldn't bang his fist on the table, and you can understand why he would bang his fist. As you rightly said, Martin, that's Bottas wrecking his qualifying, wrecking his car, and not exactly doing his teammate any favours at all.
There's a set of tyres.
So Valtteri, it's red flag. Just let us know if you can, if you're okay.
Yeah, all good.
It's a round of applause from the Aussie fans here. Packed into Albert Park this weekend. Ticket sales up and a record crowd expected for tomorrow's race. The medical car will be deployed, Martin, as it always is, to check and see if the driver's okay, and there'll be a measurement in the cockpit, won't there, to see what the impact was.
Well, they've also got a measurement in their ears, accelerometers in their earpieces, so the FIA have got real-time information as to how hard what the G level was of the impact, and that had a lot of rotation in it, which is not a good thing to have necessarily, but I can't imagine it will affect his participation in the race.
He's not started lower than 9th in his Mercedes career, Valtteri Bottas, the 20 races he's been with the team. I wonder if this might necessitate more of a grid place drop, Martin. Look at the angle that he's gone in. If that gearbox has survived there, I'd be very impressed and surprised.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And all the wheel tethers doing their job very well, as they should be, to keep the suspension and wheels within the confines of the accident.
What about a chassis change as well, or would the chassis stand up to that okay?
Well, the rear end's fine because that all unbolts, but it's a question of whether it's punched a hole in the chassis with the wishbones of the front, or sometimes the tyre comes back, tyre and axle comes back and can damage the chassis as well, as it sort of folds into the especially in a rotating shunt like that. It goes wrong here on the first apex. And you can hear his throttle go down as he hit the wall. His foot went down and gave it a... So I think that actually started by getting a bit greedy on the curb at the first apex, jumped him slightly wide, went up to the grass, still believed he'd got enough grip because he's in a Mercedes Formula 1 car after all, and he hadn't, unfortunately.
You say got a bit greedy into turn 1. Is that the sort of thing, do you get greedy because you know you're chasing someone who will put 6/10 between you at one stage in the previous session?
No, that's I think just a slight lack of accuracy. It's a funny corner to turn into. You're on your out lap and suddenly you've got to brake and turn into the first corner, and sometimes the front gives you usually less grip than you're expecting. And if it gives you a little bit more grip, you know, if the car rotates more than you're expecting, I believe, we'll look at it on the SkyPad, but I believe he just clipped the curb into the first apex and it pushed him wide, and then it was just a snowball effect for him.
There will have been others out on the track whose lap would have had to have come to a sudden halt, as it were. Not quite as sudden as Valtteri's, obviously. That's not going to help those that had already started their lap, including, of course, his teammate Lewis Hamilton. We can go down to the SkyPad. Paul di Resta is there for us this weekend. I mean, Paul, these things happen in qualifying. You've been taking a look once again at what happened to Valtteri.
Yeah, we've been reunited. This is exactly what you don't want in a scenario like this for Valtteri, but you know, we can see exactly what happened. So as Martin says, I'd actually radioed into the boys to actually say that's what he'd done. He'd hit the inside curb, but just watch the oscillations as he touches this inside curb. Watch the front of the car, just keeps bouncing, catches that wet grass, and unfortunately away round it goes. That was a big change. That could be a chassis tonight. Could have even overrevved the engine, as you heard it just when it went in the wall there. His foot was obviously still in the throttle. Quite a big impact. The medical car's there. Hopefully Valtteri will be okay, because obviously nobody else can drive that car now that he's been out there in qualifying. And there you go, but front suspension damage is quite key to that chassis, puncturing it. But you can see, this is why everybody loves this track. There's no room for error. You know, you make a small mistake, it costs you. On the big new generation of tracks, you wouldn't have seen that, but extensive work tonight. Not the way he wanted to start, given where he finished last year. Ultimately, over to Hamilton. He's got a lot of work to do to represent that team tomorrow.
Thanks, Paul. 2015, Valtteri Bottas, of course, missed this race due to a back injury at the final corner when his car went off into the gravel there. You can just see him getting out of the medical car and going into the medical centre, that place you bypassed, Martin, you know, when you had that crash at turn 3 because you were running back to the spare car to start the race again. Absolutely.
Why would you do anything else? But he took his hands off the wheel just at the last moment, which is always a smart thing to do. Otherwise you can break a thumb or a wrist. It's not going to polish out, is it? That's for sure.
Yeah, T-cut's not going to work.
It's not going to happen, but you can see all the wishbones. And of course, all of that, the suspension is designed to be strong only in the direction of load.
Yeah.
And it can break like an egg when you start wiping it down the side of a barrier, which is why it all sits there looking pretty sorry for itself.
It absorbs all the energy and helps cushion the impact a bit. This will officially be the first time in this turbo hybrid era. So since the engine regulations changed for the start of the 2014 season, for the first time that Mercedes have started lower than third in Australia. That man could still get pole, Lewis Hamilton. That man could very much get pole, Sebastian Vettel. Disturbs your rhythm, I'd imagine, as a driver, though, when you get out there and then there's a red flag and you know you've got to start all over again. The clock has stopped at 9 minutes and 47 seconds. There's still time enough for 2 runs.
Got to do an out lap, of course. If you're going to do 2 runs, you've got to do 2 out laps, a hot lap, 2 in lap, or 2 hot laps, 2 in laps, and then pull it in the garage because you're not allowed to refuel it in the pit lane, and then stick a set of tyres on it, touch and go.
Yeah, so out lap, hot lap, in lap, out lap, hot lap, and as long as you've started that by the checkered flag,
you get a free lap at the end.
But I know exactly what you're saying, though, Ted. They will want to do 2 runs, make it a little bit easier on themselves if they can.
Well, of course, it wasn't a drawback to the people who were only planning to do 1 run, which was Kevin Magnussen, Romain Grosjean, so both Haas cars, and Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault. So Sainz, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Verstappen, Vettel and Hamilton had already put a little bit of wear through their tyres, but they'll go straight back. I've just seen, actually, the chief mechanic at Mercedes, Matt Dean's gone onto the pit wall to talk to Ron Meadows, the sporting director, about what he thinks might need to be done to fix that car to get it ready for the race tomorrow. They can break the curfew if they want, can't they, Crofty, I suppose, because that car probably won't be in Parc Ferme, you would have thought.
Well, they can break it. They're allowed to break the curfew a couple of times a season.
Exactly. So that's probably what they'll do. We'll wait to hear on gearbox penalties and the like.
Gearboxes, you get 3 for the season. And this, obviously, the first. Engines, you get 3 for the season. 6 elements to an engine, 3 of which you only get 2 for the season.
Is everyone okay? Yeah, Valtteri has hit the exit turn 2. I think driver okay.
He was unlucky with that crash, I must say. Very unlucky.
He was. Session will restart then in 1 minute and 20 seconds time. And this delay just heightens the anticipation for what might be to come. And you mentioned, Martin, didn't you, when we were riding on board with Lewis, you know, the sun and the light at this time of the year, it's not easy as you're driving into that, to the sun almost and towards turn 1.
Especially spotting that first apex with slightly unknown tyre temperatures and pressures and brake temperature. I mean, they can see them inside the car, but you know, they're not fully optimised down into turn 1.
So, in a year for Valtteri Bottas, where he could stay with Mercedes at the end of it, or might have to find employment elsewhere, got off to the best start.
These kind of things count against you very badly, I'm afraid, but
especially when that man, Daniel Ricciardo, lining up at the starts and the entrance to the pit lane, to the track, I should say, is maybe waiting to decide his future as well, been linked with a possible move to Mercedes in the future. Slippery track.
Daniel, there is possible hydraulic fluid right hand side exit turn 2, so have a look at that on the way out.
And we're all queuing up to get out once again.
Surprised they haven't cleaned the hydraulic fluid up with a bit of dust or the product that they use, but when you're fully loaded and lots of lateral grip going on, the hydraulic fluid is not ideal.
You can see it pouring out of the back of Valtteri Bottas's car. Yep, it's the last thing you want. I would imagine they want to get on with this qualifying session as quickly as they can. So out onto the track then. Eventually comes Kimi Raikkonen to join Hamilton, Verstappen and Ricciardo out on the track. No sign yet of those, as Ted was saying, that they're doing the one run here. The Hulkenbergs, the Grosjeans, Magnusens and Sainz. Sebastian Vettel takes his time and then comes onto the circuits.
On his psychedelic ultra softs. Well, it clashes with his bodywork, doesn't it?
Quick message from a pit wall in the pit lane. There is no curfew on a Saturday evening, I'm told. So talking about breaking the curfew, which is a rule introduced to give the teams some proper rest time in between all the work they do, but on a Saturday night there is no curfew, so they can stay here late, Mercedes, without a penalty.
Parc Fermé, isn't there? Normally the car's going to Parc Fermé, but he's going to be starting from the pit lane anyway.
Yeah, exactly. If you take the car out of Parc Fermé, you're starting from the pit lane, but they're going to need to do that if they need to change the chassis.
And the Jarno Trulli finished here, 2009, finished on the podium from the pit lane.
He did. It can be done.
Thank you, Statman.
So then, let's see. Hamilton going for his lap first, then Ricciardo, then Verstappen, then Raikkonen, then Vettel. That's the order the cars will attack this hot lap. Do you want to talk us through these 3.3 miles, Martin?
I do. I hope we go on board. There's the bumpy turn 1. You can see the kind of speed they take in there. Normally it's a little bit bumpy across the apex. They don't go wide. They don't want to be out there. Long right curve down to this turn 3 can surprise you. Then you've got to be quite patient through here, through the car park. Flat out through 4, ride the curb on the exit to arrest the slide. Turn 5 easy, don't go too wide. Straight line through here, down 3 gears. Look at the speed that thing's taking in there, fantastic. Around the wall of 8, flat out, loads of lateral G. And now you've got to spot your braking absolutely right as the nose nods on the bumps, but that Mercedes-Benz is riding the bumps really well, and that's the best I've seen the front end go in to turn 9 yet. You see what sort of commitment, confidence he's got into 11 and 12. He said he was not braking through there, flat out through the exit, leaning on the first part of the curve. It's the only place you want to be. Straighten the car up for retardation, get it into the apex, and yes, just a little bit of oversteer through there as he got too much torque coming out of the engine, but he was still critically going forwards. You must not lock a brake in here. And slightly wide, they're slightly wider than they would ideally want to be. And this too.
So Hamilton then down the Walker straight, his time that the others will have to go for a 1:22.0. Sebastian Vettel was a 10th quicker than Hamilton through the first sector. Daniel Ricciardo goes second fastest, but his teammate Max Verstappen have been matching Hamilton to within a 10th during the course of that lap. Only 6/100ths of a second down. Verstappen's on the front row at the moment, but Sebastian Vettel has got purple in the sectors. He has hit the best 2 sectors so far on his lap. Kimi Raikkonen is next across the line for Ferrari. He's 2/10 off, Raikkonen down in 3rd. And we all turn now to Sebastian Vettel coming through through the penultimate corner, slowest on the track, wanting to get that throttle down as quickly as he possibly can. DRS is wide open, the Ferrari accelerating down the straight, and Sebastian Vettel misses out on provisional pole position by 3/100ths of a second. It was perfect all the way until the final sector.
I thought he was going to do it because Hamilton's got another 1/4 of a second left yet in those last 2 corners. He never really quite hooked the front up, and it left him sort of flailing a bit through the last corner, and I really thought he was exposed there to Vettel snatching provisional pole.
I need more front grip.
Understood.
They can't do too much to the car, though. If he wants more front grip, how do they give him more front grip?
They're in parc fermé conditions as soon as they roll out into the first part of qualifying, so all you've got really is front wing angle, tyre pressures if you've got any scope on that, and you can then change the differential, which he's got on his steering wheel, to get rid of some push into the corners. You can release the rear, the diff at the rear, so it doesn't push the car forwards.
I'm just going to say this, Martin, and you can make a comment how you wish. Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen separated by 6/100ths of a second. 6/100ths of a second between the top 3.
And for me, Verstappen's was the lap there. Yeah. That was sensational.
Everybody's just a 10th apart. There's still a lot of meat to be got.
Yeah, and if you look down, Raikkonen and Ricciardo, only 3/10ths of a second down to Ricciardo. The top 5 separated by 3/10ths. If I could wish for anything at this moment in time for this season, I'd like this to continue, please.
That's very reassuring after the winter testing. And if Bottas was in the pits instead of in the wall, he'd be right in there as well.
Absolutely. Valtteri Bottas will not be making it 3 pole positions in a row, because he did, sadly for him, put his Mercedes into the wall. Verstappen was matching Hamilton, was watching it on the timing screens all the way through his lap. Sebastian Vettel was ahead all the way through his lap, right until that final sector. And he'll know where he could possibly make up a bit more time in that final sector. If Verstappen gets the front end grip that he wants, does that give him the advantage that he needs? And has Hamilton, as you think, Martin, got another 1/4 of a second in him?
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, so might Vettel.
We shall see.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more time in the last 2 corners. Maybe not a 1/4 of a second, but on the whole lap. Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know who's going to be on pole, Crofty.
Max Verstappen never been on pole. Romain Grosjean and Carlos Sainz having their own little race in the pit lane to get out, because track position, oh so important. You don't want to be stuck behind a car if he's backing off towards the end of a lap. You want to dictate your own pace.
I believe that's all to be legal. What just went on there?
Yeah, Sebastian Vettel hasn't been on pole here since 2013. Hamilton has taken the pole in the last 4 years, and
you see,
that's what he
Sainz struggled with his steering lock. So Grosjean drove around him.
Is that a bit naughty? He's racing on the working area of the pit lane. Not racing, he's overtaking on the working area of the pit lane.
If it's in the race, they're allowed to do it. They go down side by side in the race, don't they? The stewards might want to have a look at it and say, come on, this is qualifying, but track position and everything, and the 2 Renaults went out line astern, which is not good, because one of them is going to have to back off out there somewhere to make some space. We know which one, of course, whoever's running second, which at the moment is Hulkenberg, isn't it?
Yep. So, Sebastian Vettel then comes out onto the track. Ferrari have not been on pole for the season opening race since 2007, when Kimi Raikkonen won from pole position here in Albert Park. As I mentioned, Lewis Hamilton pole here in the last 4 years. Verstappen never been on pole before. Daniel Ricciardo never won from inside the top 3, and he won't be starting inside the top 3 because of that 3-place grid penalty this year. And then Kimi Raikkonen, where can he put himself into the mix as well? Ted, down to you.
Yeah, so just quickly, Vettel maybe with a feel for the dramatic. He'll be the last one across the line at the end of the session, but they all better get on with it, because the wind is freshening up down here. The temperature's dropping. There's some rain still in the area, Crofty.
It's looking a bit dark over at Bill's Mothers.
And Hamilton's behind Ricciardo, so he's going to have to back off. This, of course, in vision is Verstappen, but Hamilton has not got the ideal track position right behind Daniel Ricciardo.
Ricciardo doesn't need to back off too much because he's got a big clear track ahead of him, but I'm sure he won't want to make it too easy for Lewis Hamilton as well. He could be playing the team game just a little bit there. Now he can blast down the main straight as we watch Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda on board with Lewis Hamilton, who, as you can see, has had to back right off there, which means his tyres cool down, of course, Martin, the longer that he does that. On board with Hamilton then, starting his final lap of this qualifying session. 6:10 in the evening here in Australia. Wherever you are in the world, I'm sure you're on the edge of your sofa or even your bed at this time of the morning if you're back in the UK. First qualifying of 2018 and only 6/100ths of a second between the top three, only 3/10ths between the top five after the first runs. How's it all going to pan out now as Hamilton gets to the end of the first sector? And oh, look at that, 4/10ths up already. That's a massive gain during that first sector. Kimi Räikkönen is also going well, at 26.9 for him, but can anyone match that 26.6? Verstappen couldn't.
Bit untidy through 9, but the first sector was mighty for Hamilton. He was so wide in turn 4 with the throttle hard on, but still he's done a purple middle sector as well. He's just throwing the car at the racetrack and it's responding.
It's almost like the breeze has stiffened up and it's giving a tailwind to Lewis Hamilton wherever he goes on the track at the moment. Sebastian Vettel was a 10th down on Verstappen and Räikkönen through that first sector. Hamilton continues then on his way, just 2 more corners to go for a man looking for his 7th pole position. Yes, 7th pole position here in Albert Park in Melbourne, down the Walker Straight for one last time. Here's the time that they've all got to beat. Lewis Hamilton crosses the line. It's a 1:21.1. It's an all-time lap record. It's provisional pole for Lewis Hamilton. Kimi Räikkönen 6/10ths down, but goes second fastest for Ferrari. Verstappen crosses the line. Can't beat Kimi Räikkönen. He'll start on the second row. What about Sebastian Vettel? Is this pole position number 51 for the 4-time world champion? No, it's not. Hamilton is on pole for the season opener for the 5th year in a row, and it is 7 pole positions in Australia for Britain's Lewis Hamilton.
You know, I said there was a 1/4 of a second in the car, yeah, I was wrong. It was 8/10ths of a second he found. It just smashed him. That was like a 2-class qualifying session, Hamilton and the rest.
Awesome, mate. Nice work. Nice work. 6/10ths to Räikkönen, P2. Vettel, nearly 7/10ths.
That is absolutely staggering for Lewis Hamilton. And he gets the applause from the crowd. Daniel Ricciardo finished 5th in that qualifying session, so he will drop down 3 places because of his grid penalty. Verstappen went wide and made a mistake down at turn 13. That would have cost him time on his final run. Because of Ricciardo's penalty, Kevin Magnussen, Romain Grosjean and Nico Hülkenberg all move up. Magnussen starts 5th. It's not his best ever qualifying here in Albert Park. He was 4th on the grid in 2014. Sainz completes the top 10. Valtteri Bottas probably won't start in the top 10. He's facing a gearbox penalty at the very least after his crash. 6/10ths of a second. Hamilton down to Kimi Räikkönen. Starts the season, Kimi Räikkönen, out qualifying this man, his teammate Sebastian Vettel, and putting his car on the front row. In terms of what Kimi might have been expecting, that's not a bad start from him.
No, Vettel just didn't deliver it, did he, in that final part? But he was never going to see Hamilton. That was Hamilton just threw caution to the wind everywhere and just went for it. It was a pleasure to watch. Magnussen, as you say, and Grosjean will start 5th and 6th for the Haas Ferrari team.
That's a sensational achievement for Haas. Kimi out-qualifies Sebastian for the first time in 6 races. Yeah, pleasure to watch, Martin, for every single person outside of the 9 other team garages in the pit lane here at Albert Park. He looks fairly happy with that. The reigning world champion has started where he means to continue, I'm sure.
Slip off that and twist an ankle.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few who said that. Might be wearing red or blue or pink, you never know. So, Will Buxton waiting to talk to the 3 drivers. 2 Ferraris and a Mercedes.
2018 season, a qualifying session of thrills and spills, and the man on pole position, a record 7th here in Australia, reigning world champion Lewis Hamilton. And as he takes his balaclava off, we'll wait to get a few words from him. some congratulations from his boys. Lewis. Lewis, that was a lap of some commitment to take the record here. 7 pole positions. How did that one feel?
You would think that with the results we've had for these years, it would be the norm, but it doesn't. It's still just as intense, and I'm like, my heart's racing. I wish you could feel it right now. But it's great to see this crowd here. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm so grateful to the Aussies having us here every year, and mostly the generally good weather, but beautiful city, and a lot of British flags here, so I'm really grateful for it. But I'm so happy with that lap. It was such a nice lap. And you know, I'm always striving for perfection, so that was as close as I could get.
Phenomenal, and 6/10 more than 6/10 on pole position. We've heard some talk about party mode. Was party mode engaged? Was it party time in the car today?
I'm always in party mode, so, you know. No, I mean, what was surprising is to see how quick the Ferraris were. I mean, I don't really know. During that lap, I was in the same mode as I was in before, so it was just really hooking up the tires, get them at the right temperature, and then putting the lap together. I'd had good sectors before, but I never, I mean, maybe the first lap of qualifying, but after that, I hadn't put them together, so.
It's a phenomenal job. Congratulations. We'll come back, talk to you in a bit. Guys, great job today. Kimi, a phenomenal lap from you. You're having a little look at the Mercedes there. First time you've been able to see them, but talk about your lap, talk about your pace today around the track. A great job from Ferrari.
Yeah, I think it was pretty decent. Really decent job, but obviously, you know, the lap time difference is still quite big, but it was a very straightforward session because with the weather this morning and you know, the disturbance in the last qualifying, but yeah, we have to be pretty happy where we're starting, but obviously there's still awful lot of work to be done and to improve things, but yeah, not too bad.
Great job, Kimi. Well done. Sebastian, maybe not the day that you were hoping for, but pace in the car looks good. Just that massive push from Lewis at the end there. Are you happy with today?
Yeah, I think we can be. I mean, yesterday I wasn't happy. I didn't really feel the car, so it just kept coming better in qualifying. I think the last lap I had a little bit of a moment into 13. I tried to brake really late, didn't work. But yeah, it was really close. I mean, exciting, obviously, also for us if it's that close. Yeah, shame that Lewis had a quite a big gap at the end, but I guess his lap was pretty good. So looking forward to tomorrow. I think we did improve the car to today, and yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow.
We know Mercedes always turn it on the Saturday. For the Sunday tomorrow, how confident are you you can take it to those guys when we get a proper fight on for the win?
Yeah, I hope they did turn it on today, so that means that they have to turn it off tomorrow. So yeah, but I think it's very close. I think we saw yesterday in the long runs that pace is very close, so let's see. It's not the easiest place to overtake, but who knows? We have an opportunity at the start, then in the race, you never know. So really happy, I think, for the team. It's a good result. So yeah, let's get going.
Phenomenal job. Well done, Seb. Thanks very much. Well, Lewis Hamilton has gone. Party mode is engaged. He's on party time. He's off to celebrate with the team, but is he celebrating too early? Ferrari's confident. Red Bull's right in the mix as a new era of Formula One begins here and will begin for proper tomorrow here in Melbourne. For now, though, from us, goodbye. Do not miss the opening Grand Prix of 2018.